to a special edition of the Monmouth Basketball Podcast. Today we are doing a MAAC roundtable discussion with people from around the MAAC. Some people are journalists for the local newspapers, some are fans, some just like the MAAC in general, and they're covering everybody. So we are joined by just about every team in the MAAC today. So we thank you for joining us. We thank everybody for listening in. Here's how we're going to do this. We're going to start all of our questions from the bottom seed to the top seed. So we'll go in order. One little change, we're going to do Sienna in the beginning because some time constraints. So we'll get to Sienna first once we start questions. But let's introduce everybody on the panel today. All right, we'll start with number 11, seeded Ryder, joined by Kyle Franco from the Trentonian. How's it going, Kyle?
Good. Thanks for having me, guys.
All right, next up is kind of our MAAC Swiss Army knife. He's been on our podcast a long time. Nobody covers the MAAC quite like him. It's Jaden Daly from Daily Dose of Hoops. He's going to cover Manhattan today, as well as a couple other teams that we didn't get reps for. So what's up, Jaden?
You know, you guys are too kind. The check's in the mail. Thanks for having me on again.
Next up, number 9, Iona. One of the few guys in the Iona crowd that Mark and I began to get along with after years of a rivalry. He's one of good friends of the show. That's Guy Falatico. What's up, Guy?
Well, I'm not going to scold you too much. The last name is Falatico. But that's okay. I'm not famous, so it's all right.
I had a friend in high school that was Falatico, spelled the same way, so that's my bet on that one.
I've heard far worse, and I'm not going to get there because then we get into that hashtag MAAC After Dark thing, so I'm not going to go there.
Next up, number 8, Quinnipiac, covered by a few people. It's going to be Vinny Simone. He's at VT Simone on Twitter. What's up, Vinny?
How are you? Thanks for the invite. Happy to be here.
Thanks for coming. And also we have the Robinson brothers from All Facts Media. What's going on, guys? Andrew and Aaron, you there?
Yeah, can you guys hear me? Sorry.
Yep.
My microphone was muted, I believe. Can you hear me now?
Yep, you're good. How's it going?
Cool, yeah, we're doing good. Thanks for having us.
No problem at all. Thanks for coming. Number 7, we have Fairfield by Frank Aquino from Fairfield. How's it going?
Good. You guys can hear me?
Yep, you're good.
Awesome. Thanks for having me, guys.
Thanks for coming. Number 6, Canisius, and number 5, Niagara are covered by Rachel Lindsay, a journalist from the Buffalo News. How's it going, Rachel?
Hi, thanks for having me. Looking forward to talking some MAAC hoops with everybody today.
Us too. Number 4 is going to be covered by a combination of Jaden and the Robinson brothers from All Facts Media, as well as number 3, St. Peter's, 2 of the schools that we didn't get reps from today, so those guys will help out. You've got Mark and I'm Ryan, covering number 2, Monmouth. And number 1, Sienna, is covered by Michael Kelly, who is an editor for the Daily Gazette Sports from the Albany area. What's up, Michael?
Oh, just excited to talk some hoops. Thanks for having me.
All right, so let's set some ground rules for today. We're going to do most of our questions besides Sienna in the beginning. We're going to go from last place to first place. You finish your statement, and then if anybody wants to jump in or debate or has a question for you, anybody can feel free to speak at any time. So let's start number 1. We'll start with Sienna first. We're going to do your 3 questions first, Michael, all right?
That's great. Thank you.
All right. Number 1, give us like a quick 1-minute recap of your season for Sienna. They were first place in the MAAC. We got the number 1 seed. So how do you feel about your team going into AC right now?
Sure. So, I mean, Sienna was picked to finish first. They end up where they were supposed to from the regular season. Obviously, a lot of odd things, like a lot of teams this season, happened along the way. Besides the different things related to the pandemic, obviously the biggest thing for this Sienna team was, a couple players left before the season started, only 10 scholarship guys on the team. There's been some injuries of late where they've only had 7 scholarship guys, available. Really only 6 of those guys play. And the biggest thing has been the health of Jalen Pickett, who hurt himself in the team's 3rd game of the season. Missed a bunch of games and really didn't look like himself until this past week, which, timing is perfect. The rare time we can maybe say that for anything in the last year, because, he looks right heading into the tournament.
So, Michael, second question for you. Who is your X factor? We know all about Jalen Pickett, but who's your X factor? Who's the guy that's going to help your team the most raise that trophy in AC next week?
Sure. I think with the way that it's developed for them, I think the answer to that, which is surprising, has become Colin Golson, who's the freshman forward who comes off the bench. He's pretty much had a classic freshman season. He's looked really good at times. He's looked a lot like a freshman at other times. And where their depth is, they need him to be able to, provide points, provide something either off the bench or if he does start, so that Siena's getting something outside of that big four they have of Pickett, Camper, Stormo, and King.
So Mark, I'm going to have you ask all the questions, read all the bonus ones. Right?
Yeah, so I got a couple for you. I'm going to fire at you here, Michael. First, what is the likelihood that either Nick Hopkins or Aiden Carpenter will return for the MAAC tournament?
Yeah, I think you definitely see Aiden Carpenter. I think he'll be there Wednesday. I think he could have played this last week. And it was just, he wasn't entirely comfortable in coming back from, what seems like, a slightly severe sprained ankle. Nick Hopkins, they've played that one really close to the vest. It's some type of knee, leg injury. He is out of his brace. I think it's unlikely he plays. But I know if there's any way he can get on the court, even for 10 minutes, that Siena wants to do that because of the type of presence, that veteran presence that he brings.
So, if so, with Carpenter, how much do you think Siena can expect from him coming off the high ankle sprain or severe ankle sprain?
Yeah, I think you'll see him be fully available in that quarterfinal. I'd be surprised if he's not. He's kind of had a similar year though to Golson, who I talked about a minute or two ago there, where he's had some moments where he's looked very talented. He's had some moments where he's really looked like a freshman. I don't think he's going to have any limitations. It's just a question of how much he can put it together, for his first MAAC tournament.
So I was torn apart by the Siena fan base for not referencing him back in the summer when I was on with Guy, and I was just quickly jumping into each of the teams and who they have back and what was going to happen. And I believe it was even before Carrie had left. So I did not mention Aiden Carpenter, and the Siena fan base, like they tend to do on social media, really ripped into me for not referencing who they said was clearly the most talented freshman coming into the MAAC that year.
I'm familiar with the experience.
Quick question then. Say they get Carpenter back. We know they have Camper. We know they have Pickett. We know they're two of, if not the two best players in the MAAC. And then you talk about King and Stormo, who's really been the surprise for Siena this year. Do they have enough to win it all in Atlantic City without Hopkins? Let's say Hopkins doesn't play.
Yeah, that's a good question. They've been playing, a walk-on Robert Mahala, decent minutes these last couple games. Whether or not they have enough, I know we're kind of skipping ahead here. I think Siena, I don't know if anybody would dispute, they're the most talented team in the league. The depth has become a real concern. I think for them, what it comes down to is if they get to the end of the game and the box score shows that Camper, Pickett, King, and Stormo have all scored in double digits, that probably means Siena won. If they don't get that each of the nights from those four guys, it probably means Siena's going home.
So interesting, because I don't think many people outside of Ludenville or Albany would have expected Jordan King and Jackson Stormo to be the third and fourth most important players for Siena coming into this year. One more for you, Michael.
Sure.
Does Siena have the toughest projected path just to get to the MAAC final? When you project, and sorry, Vinny, you project it's probably going to be Iona in a 1-9 matchup, and then they're going to get either Marist or Niagara if they can survive the Gales. Is that the toughest path when you look across this bracket just to reach the final?
So I'll start off by pointing out Quinnipiac did beat Iona, right? Is that correct during the regular season? I think it's unique that Iona's being penciled in.
Not by me.
No, I think
Not by me either.
I think that I didn't mean to start something there. I think the question's a good one. I think I get, I don't know if I fully have thought about, who has the toughest path. What I would say is this: Siena is thrilled that St. Peter's is on the other side of the bracket. I think that's the team that would make them the most nervous. And the fact that that's a championship potentially matchup for them, I think that they have to take that and be satisfied with what else they get. It is a really tough tough road though. I mean, like you say, but I think that would, if you were to give Carmen Massarello, he had to be truthful with you. I think his number one thing would be that St. Peter's is on the other side, and he'll roll with it from there.
If anybody else wants to jump in with anything on Siena, please feel free. If you want to disagree with what Ryan or I said or what Michael said, or ask any follow-ups with Michael before we move on to Kyle. Thanks so much, Michael. Appreciate it, man.
Thank you.
Michael, last one for you.
Sure.
Quick answer. Who is your dark horse, and who do you actually see winning it all? What's your prediction?
Sure. So I'll predict. I guess I'll go like full homer as the representative. I guess I think Siena wins the tournament. That's would have been my prediction before the season and throughout the whole season. I never really wavered in thinking this is their year to do it. I think that my dark horse is Niagara. I think the pieces are there. I kind of like their draw. That would be my, outside the top couple. I'd imagine we're going to get a lot of Ionas. And that would be kind of my secondary dark horse, even though I don't even know if people are considering them a dark horse. But I would go with Niagara.
Definitely fair enough. I think we'll hear both of those teams a couple times today. All right. Let's go question one to Kyle. We'll go with Ryder. Kyle, quick season recap, and how do you feel about your team going into AC?
Well, obviously it was a tough year in Lawrenceville. 5-16 overall, 5-13 in the league, a last place finish. It's the first time Ryder has actually finished last in the MAAC since 05-06. They joined the MAAC in 96-97. So only twice have they been in last place. This was probably the worst season record-wise they've had in 15 years. But obviously, when you looked at them, this was always going to be a bit of a rebuilding year, just in the sense that you had 4 1,000-point scorers depart off last year's team. And when I'm talking 1,000-point scorers, I'm talking guys who scored 1,000 points at Ryder, not like they scored half their points somewhere else and then transferred in. All 4 of them at Ryder. That's almost unheard of in college basketball. And I think the stat was the only team in the country that graduated a higher percentage of its scoring than Ryder this year was Kentucky. And Kentucky does that just about every year. So I think this was always going to be one of those years where they were going to be rebuilding. They had 11 new players coming in. And then I just think, with the way that the pandemic disrupted everything and not being able to have the preseason, not being able to have the non-conference schedule where you could really find out what rotations worked well together, really get guys to gel with each other. I think that hurt a team like Ryder that had so much roster turnover more than it would some of the other teams that had experience. Like Siena had first-team guys coming back. Monmouth had first-team guys coming back. St. Peter's, had guys like Indefo coming back. So I think Ryder was affected more by that than most. And they've never really been able to get in any kind of good rhythm this year.
Yeah, I think in a lot of different sports and a lot of different teams, we're going to look back and see what could have been for whether it's NFL or MLB or NBA or NCAA, what could have been for some teams if they had a preseason. But we won't know that, but you're definitely spot on with Ryder. Jaden, give us a little bit on Manhattan. Quick recap for them, and how do you feel about them going into AC?
Well, losing 8 out of 10 is not the way Steve Masiello wants to go into the MAAC tournament, playing his best basketball in March. Not so from a record standpoint. But Manhattan is in the position now where, with Fairfield in the first round and potentially Monmouth in the quarterfinals, losing 2 games by 7 total points, where if the chips fall in the right direction, the Jaspers could make a run. You have the backcourt, Anthony Nelson, Elijah Buchanan, Samir Stewart, each capable of putting up 15 points on any given night. Samba Diallo's coming into top form. Warren Williams is probably one of the best big men in the league. My concern, though, after those 5, Manhattan's bench production hasn't been where it normally would be. and the shooting inconsistency is just too much. There are times, and we've all seen it, that the Jaspers will shoot themselves out of a game. And against a defensive-minded team like Fairfield Tuesday night, that concerns me more than anything.
All right, Guy at Iona. All right, quick recap. I mean, there wasn't a lot to recap. You guys missed a lot of games this year, not to the fault of anybody else, but quick recap. And how do you feel about them going into AC?
Well, you know the story. A whole lot of shutdowns. They missed most of the non-conference slate. Got it together for 3 straight wins, then went on pause for 51 days. Came back, got itself together with 2 strong wins against Monmouth, then went on pause again. I don't think anyone would disagree that Iona has as much talent as anybody in the league, and of course, one of the best coaches, if not the best coach, to win the tournament, even with 4 wins needed. But honestly, it's asking a whole lot to come off pause and win this thing, especially when the best team in the league awaits you in the quarters so you survive the play-in game. This is a team that's missed like 60 practices this season, and sometimes they've looked like it. So I feel like winning 4 games is a tall order, but this is the MAAC. We've seen some crazy things happen. Who knows?
Fair point all around. Number 7, Fairfield, going to Frank. AC, how's it looking for you guys? And give us a quick recap of what happened with Fairfield this year.
Yeah, sure thing. So second year, Coach Jay Young. Whenever you have a coach in his second year, you want to see progress from the new players that are Jay Young players, but also, the legacy players from Coach Johnson, doing their jobs as well. 2020 to 2021 had 4 transfers coming in and 4 freshmen coming in, one being a redshirt freshman as well. So a lot to mesh. So not only do you have a short year last year with Coach Young, coming in April and having a shorter roster span, but this year with COVID, not as much time to gel. So, you look for progress. They had 8 MAAC wins last year. This year they had 7 with 2 less games being played. So, I'm taking hopefully a progress little bump a little bit for this year. But 2 negatives going into the tournament from this year is, Jalen Leach was hurt his ankle in the I think it was the Marist game a couple games ago. So without that scoring threat, and then because of a scuffle with Manhattan the last game of the season, we might be out one of our big men who was going up against Warren Williams, Supreme Cook, for returning a ball. I had a nice little exchange with Mr. Daly about that, and we might be out without one of our bigs and one of our scorers. So I think we are playing really good basketball right now. It's we're definitely trending up with Jake Wojcik, the Richmond transfer, scored 33 against Manhattan in the last time out. So I think we're trending in the right direction, and if he can be our X factor and continue that scoring threat, hopefully we have a path to the quarters and a competitive game in the quarterfinals.
It's certainly anybody's tournament. I really don't think there's any way to really say that this year, like obviously we said Siena's the most talented team, but it wouldn't shock us in any way if Fairfield put off an upset against Monmouth, or Iona went on a huge run, or even Manhattan. I mean, it's really anybody's tournament, and we really haven't been able to say that in a while. Typically, it's a top 4 or 5, but this year it really is anybody's. All right, off to Rachel. Talk about Niagara and Canisius a little bit. Quick recaps on them, and how do you feel about either of their chances going to AC?
All right, I'll start with Canisius. It's been a long season for the Griffs. Not because of the number of games they've played, only 12, but they've been on pause for 6 weeks in the season from the beginning of January to almost mid-February. And when you talk with some of the players at Canisius, one thing that I don't think is talked about enough this season, in the scope of basketball, is the mental and psychological toll on this team off the court has been very obvious. I mean, you talk to some of these players and coaches, and being told not to do much or anything basketball related for 6 weeks, that's stressful and it's exhausting. And, we have to look at the mental health standpoint of what these teams and players and coaches and personnel are going through every day in order to play basketball. But in that same vein, when Canisius finally returned to the court in February, and they played probably their best basketball in the sweep of Quinnipiac, right off the bat. And I was sure playing basketball really is a relief and a joy to this program, and being on the court's become, an escape of sorts. And in those 12 games, we've seen obviously a lot of new faces at Canisius. Malik Johnson, the all MAAC point guard, graduated last year, so they really had to work at the perimeter to kind of find some flow there. There are a lot of new faces on this team. Siam Eitendahl, who's a guard from the Netherlands, George Maslenikov, a forward from the Ukraine, Amadou Fofana, guard who transferred in from Erie Community College. They're really starting to find the pieces on the perimeter. Among the returnees, they have Jakob Fritz, who's a very strong defensive presence inside, but didn't play this weekend at Siena due to an undisclosed injury. He's a question mark right now for the opening game tomorrow. Scott Hitchens' minutes were really low. He's been working through knee and leg injuries. But another guy who's kind of really come about, especially late, is Majesty Brandon, the guard. He went viral last year. It was funny for his free throw shooting, but he had the game-winning shot this weekend versus Siena with about 10 seconds left. And I think all of this, again, playing basketball for this team, it's really kind of a gift and a relief for Canisius. And I don't know if they're going to go far in the championship game or even to the semis, but I think they're really going to enjoy the fact that they can get out, they can play basketball. Again, granted, this is all if they have no positive tests this week. That's the biggest X factor we have to acknowledge in this tournament. One positive test could change a lot for a team.
All right, and then that was Canisius, or that you did both?
Canisius.
All right, how about Niagara?
Niagara, there's a lot of promise for Greg Paulus and this team. With All-MAAC guard Marcus Hammond, they had a nice midseason addition of Jordan Cintron, who's a forward and transfer from Longwood. He's added a really nice punch inside to offset Kobe Nwandu, who's Niagara's leading scorer, but the timing is not good for Niagara right now. They are in their second COVID pause of the season, even though they're coming off splits against Monmouth and Siena. And their regular season finale against Canisius was canceled. So we're going to have a few question marks around this team. They've been a little erratic all season. This was a team I'd watch Niagara and I'd say, I really want to see more out of this team. Greg Paulus was put in a bad situation last year, made the most of it last year. I think Niagara would have had a great chance to do something on last year's tournament. This year, with the pause, with not knowing if they're going to play, they're in the bracket right now, but I think the MAAC said it's until Sunday night teams can withdraw. We don't know what's going to happen with them. And at the same time, not playing until Thursday against Marist. The cards also fell in Niagara's favor timing-wise. They are probably going to end up having 2 weeks to get everything together and shed whatever COVID virus they have to shed, and maybe they'll be arrested. I think Niagara is going to be kind of really the question mark / team to watch in this tournament.
Yeah, Mark and I spoke about them last week, talking about how we really didn't want to see them because they pushed us really hard this year. Mm-hmm. And also, you have Nwandu and Hammond, who are one of the best duos in the league, if not the best. And if they get on the court this week, I don't think they're a team that many people want to play. So it's going to be really interesting to see how they do.
Yes,
I think I skipped over Quinnipiac. So let's start with Aaron and Andrew first, and then Vinny, you'll chime in right after them. I think I skipped them before. So Aaron and Andrew, give us a little bit on Quinnipiac, and Vinny will follow right up.
Yeah, Quinnipiac, obviously the team, they've had an up and down year. Obviously their record is 7-10 in the MAAC, but me personally, obviously not being biased because I played there, but I think they're a team. They could very easily be 10-7 right now. They've given games away. Even the one earlier against you guys up at Monmouth when Quinnipiac was leading by about, I think, 7 points with about a minute and a half left. Turned the ball over 3 times. Bergoni missed the front end of a 1-on-1, and they completely gave that game away at Monmouth. And then obviously you came back in night 2 and Monmouth won. And then obviously another game against Canisius. Canisius coming off pause. Hadn't played a game in like 40, 50-something days. You're at home. You're up by about 15. And somehow you lose the 15-point lead, you drop that game. And then St. Peter's the other night, similar situation, had a lead late in the game. Brendan McGuire is taking the ball out of bounds. Doesn't know that he out of timeouts. Called timeout, gets a technical, and that takes a 1-possession game to a 2-possession game. Now you got to play the foul game and you lose a game at home. But those are just 3 games that you could, that you flip those, you're 10-7, and you're, second and third seed in the MAAC tournament. So very, very young team. Have had some ups and downs, had some promising moments, and have moments where they've looked, like a young team. Obviously, 4 of their top 5 scorers are freshmen and sophomores. But they're a very balanced team, obviously a very well shooting team. You got 7 guys that average between 7 and 12 points per game. So, when this team is playing their best basketball, they are a dangerous team. But then obviously you have their moments where it look like a young team. And then that's when you obviously have the instances where you get swept by a Monmouth, you get swept by Canisius, where those series could have very well have been a split or a sweep. So it's been an up and down year. But all in all, I think Obviously you're not necessarily happy to play Iona the first round of the MAAC tournament, but not a bad year for Quinnipiac.
Vinny, how do you feel about Quinnipiac coming in?
Feeling pretty good, but like Aaron mentioned, a lot of their troubles have come from themselves. They've had a lot of unforced errors, inability to inbound the ball, forgetting about timeouts, having trouble against the press late in games. So, a lot of their troubles are within themselves, which, gives me hope that they can fix that down the road. But, they're one of the best defensive teams in the country. They proved that all season long. And if they hit their shots, they're going to take 1,000,000 threes every game. If they're on, they're going to be trouble. It's a very deep team. They've had 7 different leading scorers this season. Early on, I think Baker Dunleavy, his main issue with the team was finding the right guys to play, finding the optimal lineup and seeing who's going to get the major minutes over the other guys. And I think in the last few weeks, he's figured it out. He's figured out who his guys are and, which guys to ride and which guys to support them with. It's an interesting matchup here. If you look at that quadrant of the bracket between them and Iona and Siena, they've played 1 game combined against each other, which, Quinnipiac won by 4 on their home court. So it's a pretty even matchup. So, really expecting anything to happen in that game. And then who knows with either team against Siena.
Fair enough. Going to Jaden, let's talk about Marist a little bit before I let Andrew and Aaron go in on St. Peter's. How do you feel about Marist coming in, Jaden?
You got to love the Red Foxes' chances going 12-8, 10-8 in MAAC play, first winning season in almost 15 years. And what John Dunn has done with this group, Michael Cubbage shows down 4 games into the year with a broken foot. He gets 2 freshman guards, Hakeem Bird and Ricardo Wright, and then a junior college transfer in Raheem Sullivan, neither of whom had played in the Division I level before. 3 of them are leading this team. Jordan Jones is a potential all-conference big who's developed into a back-to-the-basket type forward. Braden Bell can go off and hit a couple of 3-pointers at any given time. It's a typical John Dunn team. Nobody's going to set the world on fire, but the sum of the whole is greater than the sum of the parts. And at this time of the year, that's probably the most dangerous combination you can have.
All right, Andrew, talking about St. Peter's. How do you feel about them coming in, and what's their best shot of getting to the final?
Oh, sorry guys, I'm on a train right now for the feedback. I'm gonna let Aaron talk about St. Peter's right now, just because I'm in a tough spot.
No problem.
Yeah, for me, obviously, I think St. Peter's coming into the year, everybody thought it was them and Siena. I think obviously it's been an up and down year for St. Peter's, but when you look at it, you're coming in 3 seed. You can't necessarily be upset with that. I think the key for St. Peter's, kind of similar to Marist, where their team kind of takes on the identity of their coach. And Shane Holloway obviously has done an amazing job with them this year, and not being able to play in their home gym, just being able to fight through all that, and obviously just not having the most talented roster when you look at sheer talent, but finding a way to win games. When they're at their best, they're one of the best teams in the MAAC. But then you have their moments where they don't look very good. But I think a key for them is going to be Fusini Drame. They're 8-0 in games this year that he's scored in double figures. He averages about 8 and 7. He's a great defensive player, can rebound, high energy guy. Just a typical St. Peter's big guy is going to come in and do the little things. But when he's able to put the ball in the basket, they've won games. They're undefeated in games where he's gotten double figures. So I think he's going to be extremely important for them heading down to AC. So I think they're just as dangerous as anybody else in the MAAC coming into Atlantic City.
All right, so for Monmouth,
I got to jump in real quick, Ryan.
Go ahead, Mark. Go ahead.
Andrew, do you really think they miss playing at the Anatelli Center? You played there.
Hey, I don't know if they miss it. That venue is definitely no Cameron Indoor, so no. they might be happy to get away from that place and get down to AC for this tournament for sure.
Absolutely. Sorry, man. I had to jump in on that one.
No, I'm not mad at you. That definitely was my least favorite place to play in the MAAC out of all the venues by far. I hated that place.
So with number 2 Monmouth, up and down all season, but we put a lot of close games, even though they're number 2 seed. A lot of close games for Monmouth. We had most of our weekends where we didn't split. We either swept or got swept. And it's kind of one of those things where you're playing in a short tournament in AC. You're kind of thinking, all right, if they're hot, they can go all the way to the final and win it. If they have a cold night versus Fairfield or Manhattan, they might be going home early. So obviously for us, we're hoping, Dion Hammond's hitting his threes, Blake Martin's doing what he does. Marcus McClary's playing defense, and the bigs are playing well. So it's all going to come together for Monmouth, and it really could be a quick exit or a really long run to the NCAA tournament. We really are having a tough time predicting this right now. I think they're going to play well this week. They seem a little more together, even if it's been close games like Ryder last week. They've been closing out games recently, so I'm hopeful. But Mark, how do you feel coming in?
The one thing you have to love for Monmouth is that arguably their 4 top players are all seniors. So they played a ton of minutes together, played in a ton of big spots together. That core lost a MAAC championship together against the Iona Gales. You got a couple really tough kids in McClary and Pappas, kids that won't back down from anyone. And then really, if we're being honest here, Dion Hammond hasn't played to Dion Hammond's level, to our expectation or his own personal expectation in quite a few weeks. Has been shooting it under 40% from the field, not even well from 3, gotten bottled up quite a few times. And one of the big keys is, Monmouth's getting consistent performances from Martin, McClary, and Pappas, but can they get Dion Hammond being, top level Dion Hammond for 3 straight days in Atlantic City? And that might be the difference between a long run or, like Ryan had said, you run into Fairfield or Manhattan and they have a game plan. I know Steve Masiello, his game plan is always take away the top guy on the offense. We saw him do it against Justin Robinson. We've seen him do it against Dion Hammond. You see him do it against all the big scorers in the league, or even Fairfield with their defensive attack. It'll be really interesting. But the one thing I like is come March, you like having good guards and you like having seniors, and Monmouth has both of that.
So we had skip Sienna for this round because Michael answered his questions earlier and had to leave. So let's go back to Kyle with Ryder. Question 2, who is your X factor? Who's the guy that could help Ryder possibly pull off an upset or two with its young team? They underperformed, but who's the guy that can kind of get the upset for them?
Well, I'm going to take a minute to stand for Dwight Murray Jr. right here because he's a guy who has really had a first-team all-league kind of season. I don't know if he's going to end up on the first team because he's on a last-place team, but I can tell you this, Ryder would be 0-21 without him on the roster this year. He's averaging 15 a game. That's 3rd in the MAAC. He's averaging 6 rebounds a game, which is 10th in the MAAC, and he's 6 feet tall. So to me, that shows me that he's a guy who just has a knack for being around the ball. He wants the ball in his hands. He's been a real leader for them this year. And he was a guy who they weren't even expecting to play this year. He was a transfer who came in from Incarnate Word. And I'm going to go out on a limb and say none of us watched Incarnate Word play last year and knew what Ryder was getting. And then obviously when the NCAA went ahead and said, hey, all the transfers can play, he got the waiver. He was good to go. And he's just been fantastic this year, all season for him. He leads the league in minutes played as well. They put a lot on his shoulders, but for them to have a chance to win a game or two, he's going to have to get help. And I look at a guy like Alan Powell, 2nd in the league in 3-point shooting this year at 42%. He's come on late in the year. He had a big game at St. Peter's where he made 7 of 8 threes. Didn't shoot it as well this weekend against Monmouth, but he still made a couple shots here and there to kind of keep Ryder in those games this weekend. But he's probably been the other bright spot this year for the Bronx in that he's kind of emerged as a guy who can be counted on as a rotation type player going forward in this league.
All right, Ryan, I'll jump in. Andrew, we're going to go back to you. I listened to one of your podcasts earlier in the year when you guys were really diving into the MAAC and diving into Monmouth, and you really dove into Manhattan. And Manhattan was a team that I was much higher on than where their seat is now and how they have finished the year. Who's the X factor for Manhattan going into Atlantic City? And hopefully if they win a game, it's only one against Fairfield. They don't win another one. Again, that's my homer bias. But Andrew, who's that guy? Who's the X factor for Manhattan?
I think when we're talking about Manhattan, I think for them, I think it's definitely about Anthony Nelson. Obviously we know what they were expecting out of him this year, and I think when it comes to the postseason, you got to have a guy that you can rely on to go out and get 15 to 20 points per game. I was talking to Ace on our podcast the other day, and which is why I think that Iona has a shot. More so because of Isaiah Ross, they had that guy that can go out and get 20 points per game. I think the same could be said for Manhattan. They have a guy in Anthony Nelson who has experience based on his time at Seton Hall, playing in big-time games. Though he wasn't, rely on the score really much there. I think for Manhattan, that's going to have to be his role. He's going to have to be a guy that can go out there and really score 20 plus, 20, 25 for them because, as we've seen in Manhattan this year, they've had these lulls where they can't shoot the ball from the perimeter and they can't score. So I think for them, Anthony Nelson is going to have to step up. And somebody mentioned on here earlier about their lack of perimeter shooting. So I also think that Jason Douglas Stanley, Nick Brennan, somebody's going to have to come off the bench and, kind of provide some outside shooting as well for those guys.
All right, Guy. Who's your guy from Iona? Who's the X factor for this week to get into the final?
So you know what you're going to get from Isaiah Ross and Asante Gist, and to a lesser extent, you have an idea what to expect from somebody like Barrick Jean-Louis, and even Nelly Jr. Joseph, even though he's a freshman, has been very steady. So, the real X factor for Iona is Dylan Van Eyck. If you go look at all of Iona's box scores from this season, when Van Eyck plays with energy, he's active on the glass, getting 3 to 4 assists, defending well. Iona usually fares pretty well. In the games where he was less healthy or just flat for whatever reason, his numbers reflect it and really so do the game results. And I'll bring up Quinnipiac as an example. He was a non-factor in that game, and you felt it on both ends of the floor for Iona. They didn't play well, but they didn't. You can tell that they missed something in that game. They weren't quite what we saw in some of the games where they were playing much better, especially the Monmouth games, for instance. So when Dylan is involved, especially on the offensive end, he hides the fact that Iona doesn't really have a true point guard. And the offense kind of runs through him a little more than it does Asante Gist. And he makes us better on that end of the floor. A quick X Factor 1A, if you will, I'll throw in Ryan Myers. He actually leads the MAAC in three-point shooting, but he's a freshman guard. And is he going to rise to the occasion in that tournament setting? And it'll be interesting to see.
All right, Vinny, who's your guy for Quinnipiac? Who's the X factor that's going to help him pull a couple upsets here?
Well, I have a couple of different guys written down, so if Aaron or Andrew don't mention my guy, you could circle back with me. But I'm going to go with Seth Pinckney, the 7'1" center. He's really turned the corner of late. You see a lot of the time with players at this level, at the end of their sophomore season, they sort of get it together, and it seems like he's turned that corner. Had a couple of really good games against St. Peter's, shoots over 80% for the season. He doesn't qualify on the list because he doesn't take enough shots per game, but he's really difficult for other teams to guard in the paint. So if he's if he establishes himself against Iona's bigs, Nelly Jr. Joseph and Osborne Shima, it's going to be a nice battle to watch in the paint.
Andrew and Aaron, you got an extra guy for us, or he's pretty much on point there?
My guy for Quinnipiac is Tyrese Williams. I think he's a guy that coming into the season, I expected him to kind of be that guy. Obviously after, we played with Tyrese my freshman year, and also we're teammates with Cam Young. And when Cam graduated, everybody was thinking, obviously he made all rookie that year as a freshman. And then obviously the next year you were expecting him and Rich Kelly, to kind of be those two guys in the backcourt, and Rich really emerged, and it was kind of his team. And then this year with Rich gone and with Cam gone, people were expecting Tyrese to be that guy to really take that leap. And he's a guy that's capable. I mean, he's had 20-point games this year. He's had games where he's scoring double figures, but he's only averaging about 7 a game. I think for them, if he can come out there and really, obviously along with Courtwright has been unbelievable. I think before the year started, I thought he was the best freshman in the MAAC. And I don't know if he'll end up winning Rookie of the Year just because of the fact that he missed some games. And obviously there's a bunch of other guys that are having great years as well. But I think he's the most talented rookie in the conference. So you add a guy like Tyrese Williams with Louis Courtwright in the backcourt, and they can go out there and get you 15 each a night. I think that'll be huge. I think Courtwright is going to score. That dude he's wired to score. He's extremely aggressive. He shoots over contest with no type of conscience. And for guys that don't watch Quinnipiac a lot, Dunleavy doesn't necessarily like guys taking those type of shots, but he shoots them with no regard. So I think if Tyrese can get going, that'll be huge for them because they need a secondary scorer. If you're relying on, Courtwright and Ty Moore, Chenery, 2 freshmen, to come out there and produce for you each and every night. Regoni's a spot-up 3-point shooter, so he'll have his game where he gets hot. But in terms of creating offense and making plays for others, I think Tyrese Williams is the guy that they need to get some production out of this week in AC.
Yeah, there's no doubt. Quinnipiac's an underrated team with a lot of weapons, so people got to watch out for them this week. No doubt about it.
Ryan, before we jump in, I just want to say every time Williams takes a shot against Monmouth, I think it's going in. He's hit so many threes from like 5 to 7 feet beyond the college 3-point line against us. I go back to the semifinal where it was like 95-89 Monmouth, and that kid was hitting everything. Every time he touches the ball, I'm scared to death of him. And one more thing for you, Chenery, his body type, his movements, his pump fakes, does he kind of remind you of a young Cam Young? Because he reminds me, and between him and their other freshmen, I think Quinnipiac is kind of the sleeping giant if those guys stick together and continue in about 2 years in the league.
Yeah, I think with Ty Moore, his frame, because they missed that last year a lot. Because obviously my senior year, you had Cam, you had myself, Travis Aston, bigger wings that could guard, that were long. Last year they didn't really have that. You had Reese, Rich Kelly, Savion, Matt Belong all playing minutes, but they missed having that big wing that could really guard, that could rebound, that could do a lot of things. And I think Ty Moore is the guy that's filled that role. When you talk about Cam, that guy, he had 50-point games. He was a prolific scorer with the step backs and everything that he had in his game. But I think Ty Moore's a guy that he reminds me a little bit of Mikal Bridges from Villanova, a guy that just plays the right way, is aggressive, can catch and shoot, but can also put it on the dribble, put on the floor, straight line driver. He's not a guy that's gonna come in, between his legs, step back, and hit you with a lot of moves, but he's a guy that can go out there and get you 13 and 15 points, hit a couple threes, and get you a couple straight line drives. But I think him and Courtwright for sure have potential to do huge things in the MAAC if they stay. Obviously nowadays with the transfer rules, you hope that those guys stay because each and every year guys are packing their bags and heading to greener pastures. But if those guys stay, and they're both are guys that can break some records at Quinnipiac.
Let's go to Frank at Fairfield. So who's your X factor for the Stags this week in AC?
Yeah, I mean, everyone's going to have Jake Wojcik circled after his 33-point game the last time out, but I look at the X factors in 2 buckets right now. The first bucket is Taj Benning and Jesus Cruz. Now, both of these guys were freshmen on the, I'll call it the most recent year run for Fairfield when they made it to the MAAC championship in 17-18. So they have the most experience. Beyond them, there's only 2 players that played 1 MAAC tournament game on the roster. The rest are transfers or freshmen. So, we're really going to have to lean on Taj and Cruz to do what they do, get you 10 to 12 points, distribute the ball, and get some rebounds. The other X factor is going to be with Cook potentially being out and with Chris Mido who's been out the last, he had a minor injury 2 games ago that he played limited minutes, and last game he was in street clothes. I'm going to look at someone like a Zach Chrysler or a Jason Adepayi, who's a freshman who didn't get a lot of minutes up until actually the last game where he had about 6 points and he had the starting nod. I'm going to look at them as X factors too, because Warren Williams is going to be a handful in game 1. And, the Monmouth game's a little bit of an unknown because we haven't played you guys yet. But if those guys can come around and Jake can do what he did the last game, I can see Fairfield winning a game and being competitive at least in the game 2.
Yeah, Fairfield's a team we talked a lot about, and I think we both preferred playing Fairfield over Iona or Quinnipiac or some of those teams. But like you said, it's the big unknown because we haven't played each other this year. It was supposed to be a couple weeks ago, and then it got canceled due to the COVID. We got exposed by Iona and became a whole thing, and we played Rider this week, but never made it.
Yeah, it was Iona's fault.
Always is, right?
So
don't start with me now.
It's kind of the big unknown with Fairfield right now. So it's going to be interesting to see what they do down in AC for sure. Rachel, your turn. So give us an X factor for both Canisius and Niagara coming into AC.
For Canisius, I'm going to go with guard Amadou Fofana, the transfer from Erie Community College. He averaged 8.3 points per game, but he leads the Griffs with 36 assists. And Canisius is a team that likes to share the ball. And with Jaco Fritz out for the Siena series, and we don't know his status right now for tomorrow's game, Fofana is going to be a guy who really controls the tempo for that team at the perimeter. And he was also starting to find his scoring touch, as the season went on. And again, as Niagara was really picking up some rhythm and getting into their schedule. He scored 16 Friday in the win against Siena, upset win for the Griffs on the last second shot. For Niagara, I'm going to say again, Jordan Cintron, transfer from Longwood. He has inside size. He's 6'8", nice way to team up with Kobe Nwandu, who has a good 1-2 punch on the inside for Niagara. And he's another player like Fofana, who at the end of the season was starting to find his stride. Cintron averages about 7.5 points per game. He scored 22 points and 14 in 2 of Niagara's 3 regular seasons games. Another thing that's nice that, Niagara has a bit of a weapon on the bench in Cintron too. He's come off the bench in every game he's played in, so he really adds some necessary depth for Niagara to take a little bit of pressure off their inside games. Guys like, again, Kobe Nwandu, Greg Kwaka-Mensah, Nicholas Kratom. So there's some good depth inside, and I think Cintron's really going to give a nice boost to them in the postseason.
Let me just jump in real quick. Jaden Daly, when it had been announced that transfers were all going to be immediately eligible, I said, all right, who are we going to see really shift the power in the MAAC? And he had said, the first name he said was Cintron. He had also said it would be really important for Fairfield as well. But Cintron, from what I've seen, is the missing piece that Greg Paulus didn't have when he took over that team last minute last year. They were among the shortest teams in all of Division I last year. They battled for him, but they were just oversized and overpowered inside on so many nights. Nwandu plays bigger than he is, and Cintron, I totally agree with you, could totally be the X factor between one and done or cutting down the nets for Niagara. So great job. Thank you so much.
All right, thank you.
Jaden, who's your guy from Marist? And, Marist is kind of one of those teams. They got hot late. And, they're not a team we talk about a lot because typically they're a little bit lower in the conference, but now they're kind of back up with John Dunn and his defense. So who's the X factor for them?
I'll give you 2. I'll give you Jordan Jones down low, and I'll give you Braden Bell off the bench. If Marist needs a guy to get open on the perimeter and make threes, Bell is your guy. If you're looking to get into the post and go against an undersized team, Jones can do that for you. He might be a third-team All-MAC guy. John Dunn is hoping he is, but we'll see what happens with that tomorrow morning when the awards are announced. Jones and Bell are my 2 for Marist.
All right, Andrew and Aaron, or either one. St. Peter's, who's your guy that's going to help them cut down the nets in AC?
Yeah, I kind of jumped the gun on this earlier, but I think for me it's Pusini Drame. Like I said earlier, they're undefeated when he scores in double figures, 8-0. Like I said before, he's a high energy guy, a guy that can get you extra possessions. For a team that doesn't necessarily have that go-to guy offensively, obviously you have Casey Nadefo and Banks as well that can go out there and score. But in terms of not having that guy that can go out there and get you 20 like an Isaiah Ross or a Deion Hammond, I think a guy like Pusini Drame is a guy that can go out there and get you second chance points. Him and his brother Hassan Drame, we actually had Shah Holloway on our podcast earlier. He was saying that he wants to get more out of the Drame brothers just because of the fact that they do have the capability to really control games on the glass for them. So I think those 2 guys are going to be key for St. Peter's. Another one that I'm going to be looking at is going to be Marcus Lee. I think he has to be able to take care of the ball. Obviously, he's the guy that really runs that team. He really makes that team go. Obviously, he's the one that still takes the offense. He's averaging about 3.5 assists per game, but he's also averaging 2.5 turnovers per game. And he's had 5 games where he's had 4 or more turnovers. He's had games where he's had 7 turnovers and 6 turnovers. In conference play, 5 turnover games. So I think obviously in a single elimination tournament, you can't have the guys handling the ball, turning the ball over 5, 6, 7 times. So I think for him, he has to take care of the ball and make sure that he really controls the pace of that game and getting everybody else shots.
All right, Mark, our turn for Monmouth. Who's your guy for Monmouth as the X factor this week?
So I'm going to go with the guy that I've pumped up all year long, and it's been an uneven year for him in Donovan Totley. Kid has been sat a few times, coach's decision based on some of his choices off the floor. He's looked certain times dynamic with the ball and unstoppable, and other times looks like he's lost in the Monmouth system. That being said, you watch the kid and he looks like he's a kid who could drop 30 any night. You look at the Monmouth bench scoring, and he's the one guy who can come off the bench and give you buckets. And he's a guy, if he gets going and Hammond and Pappas are making shots, and Malik Martin or Marcus McClary is giving you something as that small ball 4-5, he's a guy that can take a game from a 3-point game to a 12-point game really quick with how explosive he is. So he's the ultimate X factor when you're looking at a guy who can come in and have a plus minus of plus 12 or minus 8 in 3 minutes on the floor. He's that guy. I remember listening to All Facts Media podcast early in the year. They really liked him. You've heard overlaps from people like National Recruiting Report Steve Keller say he has a little bit of Justin Robinson in his game. It's there. It just hasn't come together yet. And you know what? Maybe it's just he needs to be a little bit closer to Maryland, where his home is. And Atlantic City's a little bit further south. Maybe he gets down there, feels a little bit more like home, and the kid balls out and wins a MAAC championship.
Yeah, I think Totally is definitely the answer for Monmouth. It's been up and down all year, has a lot of explosiveness to him, but also can be a little erratic at times. So you really don't know what you're going to get from him. If he's playing the way he can play, then Monmouth's got a good shot this weekend. If he's a non-factor, it's going to be close every game. I'll try to go a little more outside the box, I guess. Nikkei Ruddy on the boards, when he's going and he's hitting the glass hard, he's very underrated and very hard to handle down low. He's not the best and most gifted offensive player, but he is a monster when he gets things going. So Ruddy's going to be very important for Monmouth. And I'll even go with the guards Sam Chapu and Miles Ruth. Miles Ruth kind of took over the starting job at the beginning of the year as a freshman, and he's been unbelievable for us. But Sam Chapu on that second team kind of makes things go for Monmouth sometimes. And when Sam's hitting shots and he's handling the press well, he changes the game for Monmouth in a different kind of way for that second group. But if he's turning the ball over and having a tough night, it kind of makes things a little bit scary when Dion and Pappas and some of those guys are out of the game. So Sam Chapu is another one for me where if he plays well on that second team and gives Dion and those guys a little bit of a break and doesn't make things go out of control, I think he can really help Monmouth this week. But Totally is definitely the answer, because if he's going, they're going to be tough to beat. If he's not, it's going to be interesting every game for them. So let's see. Number 3. All right, Mark came up with these questions on his own. So Mark, I'll let you answer these or ask these.
Sure.
Go from Ryder back to Kyle.
All right, awesome. Kyle, so I made a bonus question up for each team, did a little bit deeper dive. Ryan and I definitely try to follow the league as a whole as much as we can. I'll tell you right now, this weekend I was locked in and watched both Canisius Siena games. Those were great games. I watch a lot of games throughout the MAAC. So my question for you, Kyle, with Ryder almost had the biggest roster turnover in the league this year, besides Rick Pitino totally cleaning house in New Rochelle outside of a few handful of guys he decided to keep. There seem to be some talented pieces or young players with upside on the Bronx roster, but they haven't really meshed together consistently. Kevin Baggett's track record in the MAAC tournament is well documented, notably the failures of his loaded crew in the last few seasons. Is this the year that he can reverse that and pull an upset over a tough Canisius crew?
Well, I knew the Kevin Baggett question was coming about the MAAC tournament. It kind of goes without saying, and obviously 0-7 in the quarterfinals. It's been the one mark against him, where they just, for whatever reason, whether it be bad luck, a bad matchup, having your worst game on the worst possible night, it just, for whatever reason, it just hasn't worked out for them. And I think it sort of became a mental thing too, is that it just, they need to sort of get that weight off their shoulders. And that's why last year I thought, man, they had a good matchup against Niagara in that quarterfinal game. And I thought if they could just win that game, it would take all the pressure off them. And I thought they were going to get to the final last year. And unfortunately, COVID kind of had other ideas. in this year, look, and maybe could this year be different just in the respect that there's no expectation on them this year. I mean, this is a team that has not won consecutive games all year. So am I looking at this and going, oh, they're going to win 4 games in a row and win the MAAC tournament as an 11 seed? No, but they have played well in their last 6 halves. If you go back to the game against St. Peter's that they won, and then the 2 games against Monmouth, they played well in those 2 games. They should have won the first game. They gave that game away. When you're up 9 with 3:15 left, you've got to finish that game. And they couldn't stop turning the ball over. They let Monmouth back into the game. Credit to Monmouth. Monmouth made some shots down the stretch too, but you have to finish that game if you're Ryder. But I think if you look at the energy and the effort they've got in these last 3 games, they could go in and say beat Canisius in a 6-11 game. Then you have 2 days off and you play a St. Peter's team that you do have a win against. So is it outside the realm of possibility that they could go in there and win 2 games and all of a sudden it's this team of all the teams that's in the semifinals for them? Maybe, but my expectation is not for them to be able to make a big run based on the history of this season and that they have not won consecutive games all season long.
Thanks,
Can I jump in real quick?
Yeah,
Sure, go ahead.
I just wanted to say I know there was also a published report this week about coaches on the hot seat, mentioning Baggett as somebody who's on the hot seat. Riders finished pretty consistently in the top half of the league. There's absolutely no truth to that at all, and I have my own Rider sources telling me that Baggett's been told there's no truth to that at all. So that was just somebody throwing poop against the wall, hoping it would stick.
Yeah, and I'll add to that as well. I've always felt like he was going to be safe this year, just in the respect that they knew this was going to be a rebuilding year as well. Like they looked at the roster and saw, okay, there's 11 guys, new guys on this roster, and we don't really have the sort of the preseason and the non-conference to kind of mold things together. And this year you're really just kind of looking for things. What can I take into next year? Like Dwight Murray Jr. is an all-league level player. Alan Powell has kind of established himself as a guy who's going to be in the rotation going forward. I think the 2 JUCO transfers, Dontrell McCorder and Jeremiah Pope, are both rotation guys in this league. They've got a kid who's sitting out this year, Corey McKeithen, a point guard, who from everything I've told is that he was going to start opening day for them until he tore his ACL in the summer. But everything I've heard about him is great. I'm told he kind of comped to like a Stevie Jordan, similar kind of build, similar kind of way he moves on the court, style of play. So I know they're excited to get him. And then we'll see what they do in the offseason as well. They're going to have to go in, though, and they're going to have to get some guys in here. They could use some shooting as well. But in terms of this year, again, it was always going to sort of be that rebuilding year, and the deck was stacked against them from the start. Now, obviously, nobody is happy about going 5-13 in the league and finishing in last place. I don't think that reflects well on anybody this year.
Thanks, Kyle.
Yeah, and I think, can I jump in one more time with
Sure.
one other thing? Yeah,
Go ahead,
I think
Frank.
Kyle brought in a good point saying, you play Monday night in the 6-11 game and you get a full day off for a Wednesday game. I think that's a really good point. Like you mentioned dark horses earlier. I think coming out of that game, the Ryder Canisius winner can have a pretty good point, pretty good advantage playing on Wednesday against St. Peter's.
Isn't there a 2-day break? They don't
It's
play
a
till
2-day
Thursday.
break. Yeah, it's
Is
Thursday.
it 2 days?
That's
So
the
even better.
Thursday game.
Even
Wow.
better. So I think that could play in the favor of, maybe someone making a run to the semis out of that game.
So now we all know Frank wished that Fairfield got one more win and was in the 6.
I've told everybody that. So yep, you're right.
There you go. All right, Jaden, Manhattan bonus question. Manhattan's underachieved all season long, including 6 straight losses, culminating with an ugly sweep against Fairfield. Is this team's spirit broken, or can arguably the most energetic and passionate coach in the league, Steve Masiello, galvanize this talented crew to finally put it together before it's actually too late?
Well, they actually split with Fairfield this past week. They won the first game and lost the second. And they went into the MAAC tournament on a similar schneid last season when Masiello got extended and they lost, I think it was also 8 out of 10 or something like that. And He got 3 years when you could have made the case to not renew his contract at the end of last season. I don't know if Manhattan is necessarily broken, but there are a lot of things wrong and not much time in which to fix them. If they do win a game, they'll win Tuesday and probably lose in the quarters against Monmouth on Wednesday. I just don't know if this team is consistent enough to make a run. I just don't see it.
Thanks, Jaden. All right. Vinny will go. Sorry, we're up to Guy now. Guy, is this the most talented number 9 MAAC seed of all time? And assuming Iona can knock off Quinnipiac, how much of a legitimate threat are they to take down the MAAC favorite Siena at a true neutral site location in the MAAC tournament?
To answer your first question, yes, I have to think that the MAAC has never seen a 9 seed this talented. But they're really still playing in December form, really, given all the shutdowns. And to expect them to be at a peak performance level for an entire week, it's probably asking a lot. Quinnipiac is no pushover. They already beat Iona in their only meeting. Even if Iona survives that, I feel a lot better about their chances against Siena. Had Pickett remained in his slumber, but he seemed to wake up this weekend, even with the loss to Canisius. He was his old self for sure. Iona can win that game. They can, but they'll probably need to play the way they did in the Monmouth series to do it, and that's a tough level to reach in only their second game out of a pause.
All right, guys, stay ready because I'm going to ask the Quinnipiac bonus question, but I have a feeling you might want to jump in after Vinny and the Robinsons give us an answer. Quinnipiac had a major youth movement this year due to both graduations and transfers. How much better are those young pieces now versus at the beginning of this shortened season? And what will those young guards be able to do against basketball mastermind Rick Pitino and the Gales? So, Vinny, you can go first, then we'll go to the Robinsons, and then I'm sure Guy's going to want to chime in.
Well, let me just say first, me and Rick Pitino have something in common. We both have scored the same number of points this season. The game is played by the players. Coach matters, but, he's on the sidelines. So, the youth movement, like I mentioned in my first answer earlier, a lot of this season was about Baker Dunleavy figuring out his lineup, figuring out all the new guys, finding, of his 11 deep bench, who's going to be those main guys. So you've seen it recently, Tamu Chenery, Lewis Courtwright, they've been really talented freshmen. I believe they both average over 10 points per game this season. Xavier Lewis, the point guard, has turned a corner of late. He seemed to take a little more charge over the team, and it's been good to see. He did miss the last game of the season with a foot injury. I don't know what his status might be for this game. Bolacott, the other young point guard they have, played some minutes in that game, so it may be a bit of a group effort for that point guard position if Savion can't go. But, they've beaten Iona once, so there's no reason they can't do it again.
Thanks, Vinny. And Aaron?
Yeah, I would say first and foremost, I think they have a more than a chance to beat Iona. Just because of the way that they've been playing. Even I think they finished season. I think they won maybe like 4 of 6 or something like that. So they were playing a lot better toward the end of the season. But to answer the question, I think they definitely got a lot better throughout the year. Especially Courtwright. Obviously, he was hurt at the beginning of the year. He had a hamstring injury that he was dealing with, so he missed a few games in the beginning. But he started off that Monmouth game 2, early in the year and really kind of burst onto the scene. And from then, never looked back. But he, like I said earlier, he's a confident player. He's a guy that doesn't. He doesn't shy away from the big moment or the big shot. So I think both of those guys, neither, and Tamu the same way. He doesn't shy away from big moments or big shots either. So I think both of those guys are more than equipped, more than ready to go and take on the Gales and try to get a win.
All right, Guy, do you have anything you want to add in about what Rick Pitino might be throwing at a group of young guards?
Well, a couple things that are different. Well, one thing I want to mention about the first meeting when they played too is that Rigoni didn't even go off and Quinnipiac was able to win. So, that's going to be something to watch is what Iona does to try to negate Rigoni again, and then just hope that you guys brought up Tyrese Williams, averaging 7 points a game, decided to score 14 above his average in that first meeting too. So it's going to be interesting to see who gets off for Quinnipiac, because I think that matters. I think you kind of know who's going to come off for Iona, but who's going to be the one for Quinnipiac, and I think that matters a lot. The one difference though is that Iona's going deeper now. They had a tight rotation, and then coming in. I mean, I think the Quinnipiac game was a wake up call for them, where they said, all right, they're just going to play everybody and just see what happens. And what happens was they swept Monmouth and scored a whole lot of points doing it, because they were able to play at a faster pace, more aggressive on defense. I don't think they're too worried about how many times they foul. Iona is a little like Manhattan in that way. But they are going to run a little more than we saw early on in the year, and it's even up into that Quinnipiac game. So you're going to see a lot more guys play, and I know they're not afraid to do that. I actually asked some of you guys were on the MAAC media call, and I asked Patino that, is he going to tighten his rotation, maybe to the top 7 or 8 guys just to survive in advance, and he said, no, we're not going to be able to. We're not in shape. So they're going to play 12 guys, and if there's 4 freshmen on the floor, so be it, So it'll be interesting to see what kind of wrinkles, if any, Iona does display in that one, or if they're going to save the bag of tricks and just try to get by and then see what happens when they play Siena.
Thanks, Guy. All right, Frank.
On the record for something.
Sure, go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to ask Guy, if Quinnipiac beats Iona, do they get credit for ending the Iona dynasty, or did St. Peter's do that last year?
Only if the tournament actually concludes, because right now they're still the 4-time defending tournament champion. That's all I'm going to say.
Hey, Guy, while we're asking some entertaining questions, I saw this going around on Twitter. Do you think Rick Pitino will bust out the white suit if they make the championship?
I might, if since I'm happy to be going down there, maybe I'll wear the white suit.
Oh man, that'd be something to see. You fit right in down in Atlantic City. You go to the high rollers table, wear a couple gold rings, a gold chain, the white suit. I think you'd be fit in right down there.
Is that an Italian joke? Wait a minute now.
Fairfield, Frank, Jake Wojcik's emergence following his clearance as a transfer has really ignited the Stags' scoring attack. With Wojcik in tow, Fairfield has won its last few MAAC games, 5 of its last 6, I believe. And we know Fairfield, or 4 of its last 6. We know Fairfield will compete on defense and on the boards, but can they win a track meet down in Atlantic City, especially when they must play in the physical 7-10 game against Manhattan first? So really, I'm looking forward to, hey, can they keep up with Monmouth?
Right. Of course. And it's 4 of their last 7, and they beat Manhattan by 18 on Friday night. But they were actually, to that point of that last series, they were up 10 most of the first half of the first game, up by 3 at half, and then lost by 11, I want to say. So, they played them well, sweepable series, right? And that's the big MO during the year. They played great on the second game. They were 5-3 in the second game, and they couldn't show up on the first game. So, and there's only one chance to win a game in the MAAC tournament. So I'm hoping, Jake and others show up. We were talking about draw a little bit earlier, and I think they got a decent draw. We played Manhattan well. Like I said, we could have swept them if we played better in that first game. I would have liked to, like I said, play a Ryder or Canisius in the first game and then go on to play someone else. But, the unknowns of Manhattan in the second round and the quarterfinals is something to watch, right? So I'm hoping we're able to play tough, rebound, and have some interior defense. That's been a big problem for us. We're playing young sophomores and freshmen on the interior and a sophomore transfer. And Warren Williams has been a handful down there and just scoring at ease. So it's really going to come down to interior defense and if we're hitting shots on offense, because I know as well as anybody, our offense can be very painful if it's not flowing right.
Yeah, it's interesting. You would never think that you'd get to this point in the year and you'd be questioning defense for Fairfield as what you have to look at in that matchup. All right, we're going down to Canisius now. All right, we got you for back-to-back. Canisius, how dangerous are the Golden Griffs coming off arguably the most eye-popping result in the whole MAAC regular season, defeating Siena at the Arc and riding high on a significant hot streak to end their abbreviated regular season?
think that win against Siena is going to give Canisius a pretty good psychological lift, more of a confidence booster going into the Metro tournament. I don't know if dangerous is the right word to describe Canisius, but are they cohesive right now? Definitely. And I think that's what's going to propel this team is how much they work together, what kind of confidence they have in each other and themselves, and the whole team turning inwards and looking at what their strengths are to be competitive. You know, they don't have the same game time that other teams have. I think they have 12 games, which is the lowest total games in the Metro. But for Canisius, it's going to be either get hot now or cash in your chips and bank on next season because you got a lot of guys coming back. Canisius does have an advantage in this situation, though. You know, they didn't play against Niagara last weekend, but that was not of their own fault. We know they're in physical tournament shape, and that's the hardest thing right now for teams that are coming off those pauses. They weren't able to do anything. They got to get back in shape quickly and get ready for the tournament.
Yes, you're a pro here because you kind of knew exactly what I was going to ask about Niagara. How much does the late season COVID shutdown lessen their chances to win it all down in AC? And do you know when their first available practice has been?
Transparency is not Niagara's strong suit. Let's put it that way. You know, right now we don't even know if Niagara's practicing, and that lack of transparency isn't helping anyone's cause right now. You know, the bracket, as we know, is going to be finalized tonight by all indications. Right now, Niagara plans to play. A lot can happen in the next 9-10 hours. But for Niagara, if they do play, and I'm operating under the premise that they will, because I don't see Greg Paulus, sitting down unless, the pandemic tells him and his team to. For Niagara, the key is going to be how quickly and thoroughly they prepare themselves for the conference tournament. Because we know in those pauses, these teams can't practice at all. They can't touch a basketball at all. Any work done is done by helping individuals, and it's very limited conditioning. And conditioning is not an easy thing to do in basketball. You have to recondition at this point, and you're probably going to face a team, no matter how well you recondition, their team's going to be in a much better shape at this point. So resiliency is really going to be key for Niagara, and it's going to tell a lot about what kind of character this has as a program. Their ability to band together quickly after almost 2 weeks off, and they need one game to show up in advance, and how they're going to handle this game is going to be key. I don't see Greg Paulus's team folding. I see them putting up a fight. I mean, they're going to be, they're going to be desperate. At this point, they got a break, because their first game isn't until Thursday. So, that's going to help them as far as preparation, as far as getting the time off to recover and shed the virus and really come back together as a team. But they're going to need a quick start in Atlantic City.
Sure. So, Rachel, I will make a confession in front of all the MAAC representatives here. Marcus Hammond is my favorite non-Monmouth MAAC player by far. Wanted him at Monmouth terribly when he was at Cardozo High School. He played with former Monmouth guard Ray Salnave there. Loved him from the first day I've ever seen him play. And if Monmouth doesn't win the MAAC tournament this year, I'll be cheering for Niagara and Marcus just because I love the kids' game so much.
Yeah, he's definitely fun to watch.
Oh, yeah. All right, Jaden, you get to talk about John Dunn and Marist here. If the Red Foxes squad cannot dictate pace or John Dunn up a game, do they have enough scorers to hang with some of the other MAAC contenders in an up and down game down in Atlantic City this March?
They do against Niagara. They don't against Siena, or Iona, or Quinnipiac, whoever wins that quarterfinal game. So if Friday night doesn't turn into a John Dunn special, I don't think it looks that good for the Red Foxes, I'll be honest with you.
All right. Andrew, you've joined us now, so I'm gonna send the say it looks like you're all settled in. I'm going to send the St. Peter's bonus question to you.
Yes, sir.
How much will the constant chatter of Shaheen Holloway being linked to and even rumored to be the top choice at Fordham affect the current performance of his Peacock squad? You come in and you get the hardest question of the day, man.
Yeah, I was going to say that's a tough one. I think it's interesting because, as players, I think, those guys hear the rumblings and they hear the news. So, I'm sure it's definitely going to be on their minds. But, just from being in the locker room, I'm pretty sure that Shaheem is probably trying to do his best to silence all those rumors and silence the noise and just get his guys to focus on the task at hand. And I'll say, man, because of our podcast and just being able to cover a lot of different major leagues, I saw another name that's been linked to that Fordham job is Joey Grasso at Bryant. And they just played in the NEC semifinals yesterday and won by 30 points with 6 scholarship players. So, the Fordham rumors didn't seem to, bother those guys. And Grasso has been linked to Fordham, Iona, a bunch of other jobs in the past. So I think it just depends, man. I think that, Coach Holloway will definitely, have his guys ready to play. I'm sure he'll probably tell them that he's going to be there to stay and things like that. But, as a player, I know it's definitely going to be on their minds, but if I had to go out on a limb, I would say that that's not going to be something that they're going to be thinking about when they're playing down there in Atlantic City.
Mark, let me jump in on this one, if I may. Absolutely not. One thing about Shah that I've noticed in 3 years, and his players, and Andrew can agree with me on this, have taken on his demeanor in this sense. They don't get too high. They don't get too low. I don't think any of them are caring about Fordham this week. They're worried about Thursday night against either Canisius or Rider, and then they'll go on to the next one from there. I don't think there's going to be any kind of a factor.
Yeah, and another thing too I think is interesting is that this St. Peter's team is a team that knocked off Iona last year in the MAAC tournament before COVID shut everything down. Mm-hmm. So I think this team definitely has some unfinished business. That a lot of those guys probably feel like they should still be a team that people are talking about to win this time around. So I think that those guys are going to be locked in and focus on kind of trying to finish what they started last year. It's interesting to think about what could have happened last year had the MAAC tournament concluded, to see what they could have done. But I think this time around, those guys in that locker room are definitely going to be focused on, getting back to the championship and hopefully punching a ticket to the NCAA tournament.
Excellent. Thanks so much. You know what? For having to wait for you to get the good connection and get an answer from you, it was certainly worth the wait. Thank you so much. That was great.
No problem at all.
Yeah. Ryan, do you want to jump back in with your final question for everybody?
Yeah, I'll jump back in here. All right, let's see. So basically, last question for everybody before we get out of here. Give me your dark horse to win an AC, and give me who you think is going to cut down the nets in Atlantic City this week and win it all. Let's start with Kyle Franco back at Rider.
Does Iona count as a dark horse as a number 9?
Go ahead.
No, actually, the one team I kind of circled was Niagara. Now, I'm concerned about them coming off the pause. But they had wins over Siena and they had wins over Monmouth during the regular season. And the one guy who wasn't mentioned on here, who I really like on that Niagara team, is Kobe Nwandu, if I said that correctly. He was a guy who was a D2 transfer, I think. And he came in, I guess he had to sit last year, and he's able to play this season. And he's big guy. He's physical. He can get to the basket. He can kind of body guys up. And I thought he was terrific in the 2 games that they played against Rider. And then certainly Marcus Hammond is just an electric guard. If he gets hot and makes shots, he can carry them. So if they are able to play and able to get their legs under them, I think that's a team that if it caught fire could end up in the final. As far as who do I think is going to win it all, I still have to go with Siena. Jalen Pickett's the best player in the league. I think Manny Kemper is going to be the player of the year in the league. And those 2 guys will carry Siena back to the NCAA tournament.
All right, Jaden, I don't know if you have an article coming out or anything. I don't want to spoil anything for you, but can you give me a dark horse and a winner?
Well, the winner will have to wait until MAAC Monday comes out. I'm going to let you guys know that now. As far as the dark horse, I'll give you Marist and I'll give you Canisius. If Friday turns into a John Dunn special, Saturday is going to be the same thing. And I really like the Griffs. I think that team can go all the way into Friday or Saturday.
Interesting. All right.
Jaden, I would have bet the house that you were going to say Marist as your dark horse.
John Dunn, man.
I know.
All right, Guy, who do you got?
Well, again, I forget the standings, the computer rankings, the net rankings. Ken Palm doesn't suggest Iona is a dark horse in this thing, so I don't have to. I get my out of not having to bring them up here. My dark horse, though, I've been saying it for a good month now online. Canisius is a dangerous, dangerous team in this event. They have lots of weapons on offense and are not as reliant on threes as most MAAC teams. Lots of backdoor cuts, mid-range jumpers. So they're tougher scout for on a short-term turnaround. And as they showed against Siena, they have a press that's deceptively good. And they're deep enough to roll that out even over 4 games in a tournament setting. So they could make that side of the bracket a mess if they really wanted to. It's going to be interesting to see.
All right, let's go to Quinnipiac. We'll do Vinny first, and then Andrew and Aaron after that. All right, Vinny, who's your dark horse? Who's your champ?
I'm gonna have to hop on the Canisius bandwagon there. I saw them put up 50 points and a half against Quinnipiac. When they're going, they can beat anyone, I think. And but my team, my pick to win it, I'll go with Monmouth because I think they're the best team on the easier side of the bracket.
Yeah, I can't argue with you there. I think that's the one thing helping us a lot is that we did get a pretty decent draw. Now, we could easily lose to Fairfield and Manhattan the first game, but we'd rather play them instead of St. Peter's and Iona and Siena. So you're right. We definitely got a better draw than most there. So I guess we'll see what happens there. Andrew and Aaron, go ahead.
My pick is Siena. I think they're the best team in the MAAC. I think they have the best players, obviously with Pickett, Camper, and then also Jordan King, who has been a pleasant surprise for them this year. So I think I'm going to go with Siena to win. I don't know if Monmouth is a dark horse at a 2 seed, but I think them. I think I really like Monmouth just because of the fact that they have 4 seniors. Those 4 seniors have been through it all. They played in the MAAC final. Deion Hammond, I think, is a guy that potentially could be in a conversation to win Player of the Year. He's second in the league in scoring right now. Monmouth has had a really good year. And then obviously you talked earlier about Donovan Tolley. If that dude can find a way to rein in like his shot selection, and because that was the biggest thing talking to King right before the year, is that just his shot selection. He's a guy that can take wild shots and can kind of get off on a tangent. But this also he averaged 11 points a game in the SoCon as a freshman last year. And SoCon is one of the best mid-major leagues in the country, and so the dude can score. And obviously those first 2 games they played Siena, if they were to potentially meet in the MAAC final. That first game they literally had the game won, and Tolley came down and turned the ball over. The next game he's on suspension, so he only plays 10 minutes, and in the 10 minutes that he comes in, he has 6 points. I don't know. So I think if Donovan Tolley can find a way to just rein his talent in and just find a way to play in that system, I think Monmouth is a team that could definitely cut down the nets in AC.
Yeah, you're definitely right. I mean, and he's so good at driving to the basket too and making plays around the basket. It's a little bit Justin Robinson-esque, and it's tough seeing him shoot the 30-footer sometimes because we know how good he is driving to the basket. But again, it's up to him. See how he plays, and he's a weapon, or he can be a little bit of a liability. So we'll see which one it is this week. Andrew, you got one for me?
Hey man, I think I told Aces on the our last episode of the Auto Bid, and we were talking about sleepers in the MAAC, and I'm gonna go Iona. And similarly to what I said earlier, I think it's really just because when you have a guy like Isaiah Ross who can go out and literally and get 30. I think that when you look across the MAAC, you have a lot of teams that kind of spread the wealth around. You have guys, a lot of teams that have guys in that like 13 points per game, 12 points per game. Obviously the Quinnipiacs and Niagaras and Maris. Not too many guys that have that one guy that kind of stands out. And I think that in conference tournament time, you do have to have somebody that you can give the ball to when the play breaks down. Or a lot of these teams are going to be seeing each other for the second, third time this year. So they're going to know each other's plays. They're going to be able to scout guys. I think Isaiah Ross is a guy that can get a bucket, regardless of a scouting report and regardless of the game plan going into the situation. So I think that's what makes Iona special. You pair that with Asante Gift, who was on the last Iona team to go to the NCAA tournament. You partner that with Rick Pitino, who is, obviously his resume speaks for itself. I think, on that last MAAC coaches call, for anybody that was on there, he was kind of trying to pack it in almost, saying, "Oh, we're going to do the best we can." And I think he has some up his sleeve though. I think he knows that people aren't really going to be expecting much out of him because of the pause. So I think that if I know him though, he's not going to have his team coming into the MAAC tournament and embarrass themselves in the first round. So that would be my dark horse. As far as my favorites, I think I'll have to go. I want to say Siena, but I think I'm going to go Monmouth. And the only reason I would pick Monmouth over Siena right now is just because, like you guys mentioned, Jalen Pickett hasn't really been himself throughout the beginning of the season. Now, he really played great this last series versus Canisius, so it does seem like he's back to his normal self. But I don't know, man. I think it was too much of that regular season, for me at least, where he wasn't the Jalen Pickett that we all expected him to be. And I think that when you're going into the MAAC tournament, I'm not really sure what to expect out of him. You know what I'm saying? I don't know if he's going to be that guy that can get you 28 and 8, or if he's going to, be in single digits. I'm not really too sure. So I think for that reason, I'll have to go with Monmouth, with Deion Hammond, those seniors, and the biggest probably boom or bust guy in the league, and Donovan Tolley.
Can I jump in real quick?
Go ahead.
Yeah, I just on Monmouth, I think they need a third guy. Like, Hammond's going to put it up, and Pappas is going to put it up for them. But if they can get a third consistent scorer, because they can put points on you in a hurry, right? And I thought Malik Martin in that last Rider series was terrific, particularly in that first game when Monmouth was coming off the pause. Like, if he doesn't do what he did and score 24 points, they lose that game. He kept them afloat in that game while the other guys found their legs. So I just think they need a third guy, whether that is Totally gets hot or Malik Martin plays well or McClary gives you a big game on the block. If they can get that third guy in addition to Hammond and Pappas, they can definitely win the tournament.
Yeah, you're definitely.
I agree.
Go ahead.
Now I was going to say I agree. I remember my senior year when we played Monmouth in the NCAA. In the MAAC tournament in that first round was when you guys alluded to was in the 90s. I remember Traore, without Traore had a crazy game in the MAAC tournament. I think Malik Martin is kind of similar to that to him. Like, he's a senior, been there 4 years, played in a lot of big games. He's not going to break anybody down off a one-on-one, but he just seems to always be in the right place at the right time. He can rebound. He's a guy that's going to make the little 15-foot jump shot, gets those cheap putbacks. I think, like I said, man, in the MAAC tournament, when teams are going to have your offense scouted, your plays, you need a guy like that can just kind of just score the ball without a play being drawn up. I think that's something that he's definitely a guy that can kind of have that type of impact in the MAAC tournament. So I definitely agree that he might be a guy that could be a big time difference maker for the Hawks.
Yeah, you're definitely right. And, with Monmouth, we know how lethal Deion Hammond can be from three. We know Pappas can shoot it. But when one of those guys goes cold, as it's happened sometimes this year, you definitely need that third guy, whether it's Malik or Totally. You need a couple guys going off in order to win a game. So we're going to have to see who that is down in AC for them to win it all. Let's go to Frank at Fairfield, all right? Give me a dark horse. Give me a champ.
Coming into this, I didn't think I'd agree with Guy and Jaden, but and I guess Vinny too, but I'm going to go with Canisius. They've only played 12 games, so that means lack of tape. By this time of the year, you got 30 games to look at in a normal season. So, to Aaron's last point, hey, you've played everybody twice. You get to see the tape. You get to play them a third time. Quite the opposite for probably most of the opponents. I haven't looked at the road per se in their matchup versus them, but I mentioned it earlier. A couple of days off between the playing game and the next game, and I think St. Peter's, while they're a great basketball team, they have a lot of those guys like we were talking about someone earlier. In the 10 to 12 point range, and they distribute the ball well. But if they're off as a team, they're off. So I think Canisius can be dangerous just because of the unknowns. And then my favorite. I'll tell you a why not, and I'll tell you why. I know Carr Masiello from when he was at Fairfield, so I always root for Siena when it's not Fairfield. And I think Siena has a great and one of the most talented rosters. But I really do. If you look at that last Canisius game, they don't play well when they're up big. They didn't make good shot selection. Manny Camper was going down the floor, beating his man and missing layups. I don't know if they have it all and if they can keep it together for 3 straight games. So because of that, I'm going to pick Monmouth because I think the MAAC is a weird league and weird things happen. I've had some friends who are, basketball fans, but not necessarily MAAC fans that think Monmouth has made it to the tournament during those times of the bench mob. So I think it would only be fitting for a year like this to Monmouth to pull it off as the tied for first overall seed and not having all that publicity from the bench mob and win it all this year.
Yeah, we had the discussion on our podcast a couple of years ago when, they were the number 6 seed Monmouth and they played Iona in the final as the 1 seed. And we said, how sick would these guys be? Justin Robinson and Jelon Hornbeek and Micah. And, obviously they were rooting for them. They wanted them to win more than anything. But you're like, a team that won 55 games in 2 years couldn't get in. And then the team that's the 6th seed and started terribly that year got in. We were talking about that a lot, but you're right. I think Siena's struggling a little bit lately. They've played a lot of close games, but similar to Monmouth, and nobody's really blown anybody out right now. So besides, Iona versus Monmouth, but we'll go past that. But really, most of the games have been pretty close. Guy, you want to jump in there?
Yeah, just to that point, I think only once in the last 10 years has the 1 seed won the MAAC tournament. And even in going back into the 2000s, I think it happened maybe twice. It's just not a normal thing for the 1 seed to win in this tournament.
Exactly.
Rachel, we'll go to you. Give me a dark horse and give me a favorite for the champ for Atlantic City.
Okay, I've got 2 dark horses. If a 3 seed could be a dark horse, St. Peter's is one of my dark horses. I liked what they were doing last season. They hit a bit of a rut in the last few weeks of the season this year. I don't see that continuing into the postseason for them. And I'm probably going to jump on the Canisius bandwagon too if it comes to a dark horse. They're fresh. They haven't had a 20-25 game season. They're in better shape. They're trying to, they found their momentum, and they're going to continue that into the postseason as well. And I think maybe playing tomorrow, with the angle of consistency is going to help them rather than having to wait till Tuesday or Wednesday, if they would have had the Niagara go to Thursday, because you don't know what to do when you sit around with a lot of time on your hands. As far as winning the tournament, I'm picking Monmouth. I like what King Rice has done to build that program. I remember 2 years ago when they made the run in the tournament in Albany after, I think it was like an 0-11 or an 0-12 start, and you really saw that King Rice really had something that he could build on here. And I agree with Vinny. The bracket works in Monmouth's favor as well. And Monmouth was also my beginning of the season pick to win the title.
I got to tell you, I didn't think we'd have this many people picking Monmouth today. I don't know if it's because we're hosting this thing and everybody's being nice, or if everybody actually thinks Monmouth, but I'll take you either way.
On your good side.
Rachel, I also find it interesting that almost everybody we've spoken to, for the most part, has one of the 2 teams you cover as their dark horse. So you might.
No,
really
that's interesting. I was surprised by that. I was surprised by that for a little bit. Yeah. So, big surprise.
All right. I think we've gone through. Did anybody miss it besides Mark and I for the dark horse or champ? I think we got through everybody. Mark, who's your dark horse? I know who your dark horse is, but who is it and who's your champ?
Okay, so what I'm hoping happens real quick before I get into my dark horse, I'm hoping that sometime Wednesday night we find out that Wednesday night. I think it's Wednesday night. We find out that the Fordham job is going to Shaw, and they end up losing to whoever wins the 6-11 game. And I'm thinking that that's going to be Canisius. Now, just so that everyone knows, I've rolled into this from the beginning. My view was that Niagara is going to make the MAAC final, that Iona is either going to give Siena all that they can handle or beat Siena, and that Niagara will benefit from that. I think we could see a classic in the Iona-Siena game. I'm talking double overtime, like classic game. It just has the feel that in a year where nothing has met expectations for any of us, that game is going to actually match the expectations. And then I think that Niagara will be the beneficiary and make that run all the way to the finals. I think Monmouth benefits from an easier side of the bracket, and they end up in the finals as well. And I don't like the way Monmouth matches up with Niagara, and I'm sure my fan base is not going to be happy with me, but I think Marcus Hammond makes Monmouth pay, and Niagara cuts down the nets, opening up possibly an immediate exit from the MAAC and higher opportunities for Greg Paulus.
Wow.
I also like the idea of a Monmouth-Niagara final because you've got King Rice from UNC and Greg Paulus from Duke. We've been saying that for a couple of years now.
So Ryan, before I finish, a whole bunch of our fan base and our listeners are going to find new podcasters or journalists or MAAC people that they like and turn their back on me, since all you guys picked Monmouth and I didn't. So thanks so much for that, everybody.
Let's see. Dark horse, I'm going with St. Peter's. They're always a team I'm a little bit scared of. The way they play defense. Holloway's a great coach. I am a little bit nervous about them, but we wouldn't see them till the championship anyway. If I'm going with my heart, I got to go Monmouth. I do think they're in a great spot in the bracket. I think they have the easiest road out of the top teams. But if I'm going with my head and thinking that if Monmouth doesn't win it, I do think it's going to be Iona in the end, because you have, and again, last year I never would have said this, and then Patino came, and I can't be rooting against Cluis, no matter what. I can't be rooting against Iona no matter what, and their fans. I don't know. Patino scares me. I know, somebody said earlier it's about the players in the court, but when you put a Hall of Fame coach into this conference that has good coaches and had guys come out of here that went on to bigger conferences, bigger schools. He's just a different animal. He's something that we're not used to going against. And that team, like we saw a couple of weeks ago against Monmouth, I mean, they tore us apart. I mean, the first game was pretty good for a while, but really, I mean, they messed us up that weekend. And I just don't think we're a good matchup for them. Do I think we can beat them? Yes. Do I think they're definitely going to the championship? No. I mean, they got to go through a few good teams to get there. But I think if Iona gets hot, they're going to be very hard to beat. I think Monmouth has the easiest road there, but if Iona gets there, it's going to be a hell of a matchup. It's going to be tough.
And I also want to point out how many new enemies we're making on our side of the bracket by saying we have the easy side of the bracket. We have the easy. As soon as Monmouth gets knocked off, if they do in that side of the bracket, either Fairfield, Manhattan, St. Peter's, whoever it is, we're going to get a lot of I told you so's, but at least it'll be collectively, because that's why we have all these other people with good MAAC basketball brains here. It's a full brain trust here. So it's not just Ryan and I, saying something that we can get jumped on. So thanks so much, everybody, for, bringing your own unique perspectives and so much information on your teams. And like Ryan had said, hopefully next year we'll all be able to get down to Atlantic City and sit together, at a bar somewhere and have this conversation and really just get back to really enjoying life and enjoying everything we can. Best of health to each of you and your families. And, we really, really appreciate everything today.
Yes. Thank you guys for coming on. This was awesome. Again, like Mark said, hope to do this again next year. But everybody stay healthy, enjoy the tournament this week, and hopefully we'll talk to you soon on Twitter or somewhere else. All right.
Yep. Thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us. This was great.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks.
By the way, we'll see you all for that Quinnipiac Fairfield final on Saturday.
It's the MAAC. It's going to happen. You can feel it.
Wait, are you talking about the
Nutmeg
women's final?
Quinnipiac is gonna pull off. Quinnipiac is gonna pull off a 8-1 upset in the quarterfinals. You heard it here first.
Thanks so much, everybody. You guys stay well.
All right.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Have a good one.